prize. From a bottom-up point of view, what kind of initiatives do you think can be put in place to ensure there's a greater demand from people for the kind of leader that you're looking for? I also thought that the point you made regarding regional African economics is very important. I spent a week in Malawi last year, and I couldn't believe when I was told that the inland transportation costs in Malawi are the highest in the world, which shows the challenge they're facing. And then just for Mr. Andrews, your question, to make reference to your work there in India, it strikes me that we have a real challenge approaching where we have some states that are wealthier than the donor countries, but within those states they have people that are far poorer than the countries that are contributing to them. And could you just explain to us what are the kind of principles that an organisation like GOAL uses for changing the kind of development work that you will do in that kind of an environment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Christiane Vienne from Belgium.
Si, Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais mettre.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to focus on three elements. Firstly, development of the African continent also has to involve women and children. Every year we have the UN FPA report, and that shows the extent to which there is a linkage between how you take care of mothers' health and development levels. I would not like that dimension to be forgotten about. And when women can get an education, when they can go to school, when they get married at a reasonable age, when they can plan the number of children that they want, then they can contribute more to development of society and the overall development of a nation develops much better. Secondly, on AIDS, eliminating mother-child transmission is entirely possible if you take account of the first point that I made. But the AIDS pandemic continues to have many victims, and that affects development, particularly if you look at the numbers involved in conflicts. Now, Europe has been able to develop, and that was partly because in the post-World War, we were able to create an area of peace. And I think it's important that in Africa there is an area of peace that it's possible to create that, and that will foster development. Then my final point, if you talk about coherence and consistency of policies, particularly bearing in mind the economic context, I'm concerned at what that means. Now, we want to give less, but give better. And I think that only makes sense if there's a dialogue between both parties, the donors and the recipients. But I think that dialogue is not always effective.
Is Mr. Peter Salai from Hungary.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, Mr. Ibrahim spoke about poverty in Africa, and a biblical truth was also mentioned, namely we should teach people to fish. The import benefits and the effort to provide that for the African countries is another issue. It is more sympathetic for me that African people should grow plants in their own land and not on other land purchased by other countries. Probably the better thing is that these countries, these African countries, would form a trade association. As I am a doctor, I fully understand the problem which Mrs. Stifler mentioned. The fight against malaria is of great importance. High-intensity prevention and therapy would result in decreasing malaria to an acceptable level, and also treatment against resistant cases would also improve. Effective steps against malaria will result in great results. We do hope that after 2015, the current Millennium Development Goals will be replaced by new goals, and they will be appropriate in order to fight deep poverty in several countries of the world. Thank you.
Much. And finally, Olga Zurihan from Belgium.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a comment, because after what everyone said, it's true that it is difficult really to say everything and list everything. I'd just like to say that the biggest problem we have is lack of consistency. We're giving one hand, we're taking with the other, be it at a European level or at a member state level. So look at the APE agreements, for example. Access to the European market is going to be changed for the ACP countries that have not ratified the Economic Partnership Agreement by 30 December 2013. This is going to oblige the ACP countries to ratify intermediary EPAs, which are going to contain measures which are considered by many to be inadequate. In this whole provision, there's still no consideration of the people. Now, obviously, we didn't discuss women in Africa. We are the key, the cornerstone to the entire economy in Africa, and beefing up their assertiveness and their right to own land, their right to own property, promoting their economic capacity, promoting their capacity to get involved in microcredits, microeconomy is fundamental. It's a fundamental not just to their local communities, but also the work they do with children is essential. And thirdly, we talk a lot about our hypocrisy. I would like to add the point of our banks are engaged in food speculation so that everybody can get 15% on their pension funds. Now, if possible, in the European Parliament, we would like to get Article 2 respected. There are really laws, barriers, which seem to drive people mad when you talk about these. The rules and regulations and the red tape is driving everybody mad. So we need consistency. Let's get our own house in order first, and above all, please, thank you to all the NGOs for the fantastic work they're doing under extreme.
Thank you very much. And the first responder will be Michelle.
Alors nous partageons les...
Well, we'll share out the replies. We've only got a couple of minutes. So just to respond on the issue of women in Africa, the European Union for several months now, together with Commissioner Piebalgs and also with support from Madam Georgieva, who's the Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid, they've been focusing on making sure that we really are considering women in Africa, and work is ongoing to make sure that we're looking at small family holdings, for example, that allows women to make progress. So agricultural development policy with women at the forefront is central to the policy supported by Commissioner Piebalgs and European deputies, but I better pass the floor to somebody else. We've got so little time.
Barry?
And just briefly, the point about development through trade, not aid, made by MP Griffith, I think it's a false dichotomy, and I don't think it has to be either or, and it can be and should be both. And the Irish government's recent white paper on aid emphasised that it can be both and should be both. Secondly, that ties in with the job that parliamentarians have to try to sell the question of aid, and it is a very difficult one in the context and the backdrop of austerity that is all pervasive here in Europe. But while 7,000 children under the age of 5 are dying every day unnecessarily, then I think the aid argument is unassailable, and I would really ask parliamentarians to do everything they can to ensure that these issues are properly argued. But equally, the post-2015 agenda has to be realistic without being too idealistic, in order for parliamentarians to be able to carry that debate in their own home countries. Finally, Deputy Donoghue asked me a specific question on India, and we have regard in reconfiguring to things like the relative wealth of a country like India, which is obviously, I've mentioned their foreign exchange reserves. The general capacity in terms of personnel regarding governance is obviously a key issue, and in India it's beyond any argument that the capacity there, with PhDs being produced by India at an extraordinary rate, that doesn't really arise. But also the continuing humanitarian need, whether that can be met in country, and that is the case in India. So we are satisfied that this is, while there is a need, can be more than adequately delivered by the host country.
Thank you, Barry. And finally, Mo.
Thank you very much. To respond to the questions from the UK delegate, the issue of trade, US and Europe, whenever I go to the United States, you complain about your agricultural policy. When I come here, you complain about their subsidy for cottons. And for cotton, I think you two guys really need to behave. There's no meaning for what you are doing. In the issue of tax avoidance, yes, I mean, I think we discussed that issue. I just must say it's not just the companies. It is actually regulators also who are, who need to change their ways. And if I'm allowed to be a little bit rude, and well, not rude, but frank, and criticize my hosts here, I cannot imagine how come a subsidy of Google can register itself here in Ireland, stash away 30 or 40 billion pounds here, and that company is registered as stateless. It doesn't pay any taxes. How come you give a deal for somebody to offer them 2% tax? If, what's happening is if people start to compete on who offer less tax to get multinational companies, that is a race to the bottom. It doesn't work. I really urge that we come together and find a reasonable corporate tax and everybody apply something reasonable, because otherwise it is a race to the bottom. And the companies, and rightly so, they say, look, what I'm doing is legal. What I'm doing is legal. It is those stupid tax collectors who put the wrong tax codes. That's their problem. And so we really need to deal with that issue, both from the company side and from the regulatory side. It's not acceptable. On the issue of China, China has to deal with Africa from where the West ended, not from where the West started. And for many years, China pretended it is a developing country, so it cannot abide by the rules of developed countries. And I think now the game is up now. No longer China can pretend to be a developing country. China is a superpower now, and to really need to act the way superpowers should act, which is responsible, to be more responsible and more respectful of the rights of people. Money laundering, I mean, again, all comes under the illicit transfer of funds. What we need is transparency, really transparency, and that's in your hands. You are the parliamentarians. You can force that. So instead of complaining here, just go do it in your countries, enforce it. Well, with that, I think I'm finished. Thanks. Well, I guess I'll not be invited for dinner tonight.
No, the invite still stands. Still stands. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes our debate today. So would you join with me in thanking our three guests for their excellent presentations and for the debate? Thank you. So that brings to a conclusion our business for today. So we're now adjourning. I look forward to seeing you all at dinner this evening. But could I ask the heads of delegation to stay behind, and we will reassemble in this hall in 15 minutes for the chairperson's meeting, where we'll have a first exchange of views on the draft contributions and conclusions that have been circulated. But the rest of the delegates are free to return to their hotels. And can I remind delegates that the buses will leave the hotels for our dinner at the Mansion House at 7 o'clock this evening. Until then, I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.